Hello, BookTube. I've got a little bit of mail for you today. More mail is definitely coming. I just skimmed what was there on the front porch, but I wanted to get videos made before the real heat of the day closes in. When I don't really feel like exerting myself at all. I really feel like just laying there reading until a bit of the cool of the evening starts to happen once sun goes down. So I thought we'd go through just some of these. I have a periodical that I want to read you something from, and then a couple of these books are not from packages. I opened them already. The thing about a mail haul is that you can't really redo the moment of opening a package. And I opened these yesterday, but that mail haul degenerated into a rant. Pretty long rant and pretty passionate one. And as soon as I was done with it, I realized there's no point, and you can't redo it. So I just put them on this pile because they're worth looking at. They're worth talking about. But first, the periodical. The periodical is the New York Review of Books, which I got today. It's got a lot of stuff in it that I will find interesting. There's some articles in here that I will just wholesale skip. Don't know quite what's happened to my subscription to the London Review of Books. I can't quite get to the bottom of that, but the New York Review of Books came, and it has pieces in it that I thought were interesting. There are a couple that I'm going to write about, but the thing that I want to read you is a letter. Because there was an article. I knew the letters on the subject were going to come. I just didn't know that anyone would be readable. There was an article that there was a book that was reviewed just recently about the perception of animals, the self-perception of animals, the language of animals, the subject that's going to come up on this mail haul. And I knew that that was going to call out exactly the kind of people that I hate. And I knew that it was going to propel them to write letters, and one of them did. And I thought I would read it to you before I briefly demolish it. This is from a writer in Swindon. Peter Godfrey Smith speaks with apparent approval of the books under his review for trying to get inside, i.e. their animals' point of view, to work out how things seem to them. These phrases recall Thomas Nagel's 1974 question, "What is it like to be a bat?" which inspired the mantra of the consciousness studies movement, and there's something that it's like to be conscious. I believe there are good reasons for thinking this perspective mistaken. In the common sense understanding of the word conscious, if an animal responds to sensory stimuli, then it's conscious. But if not, it doesn't. But not if it doesn't. Okay, so the author is saying, if an animal responds to sensory stimuli, then it's conscious. But not if it doesn't. Okay. Likewise, however, likeness, however, is not an object of sense. Anything can seem, in some respects, like, but in others unlike anything else, because a seeming likeness is a relation that only similes and metaphors can conjure up between objects either of sense or of abstract thought, e.g., between items as disparate as my love and a red, red rose. The peculiar senses of bats and other species enable them to react to phenomena that don't impinge on ours, but likeness isn't one of them because they have no language in which to formulate the concept of likeness. We can imagine what it might be like for us, or how it might seem to us to have the senses bats have, but for bats, there's nothing that it's like to be a bat. Nagel's footnote insists that his "what's it like" formula refers only to how it is for the subject himself, with no implication for resemblance. But that doesn't remove the difficulty, because "how was it for you" is a question about the quality of an experience all the way to the top. How we can imagine what it might be like for us, or how it might seem to us to have the senses a bat but for bats, there's nothing that it's like to be a bat. Nagel's footnote insists that his "what's it like" formula refers only to how it is for the subject himself, with no implication of resemblance. But that doesn't remove the difficulty, because "how was it for you" is a question about the quality of an experience, and a quality just is an attribute in respect of which one item resembles another. I'm sorry I'm stumbling on this. It's not just the apocalyptic background noise. It's how utterly awful this is written. I don't know anything about this author, but I guarantee you the author is not only an academic, but in his free time a fan of philosophy. Let's try and parse that into English. The last line was, the last line is the whole paragraph. How was it for you is a question about the quality of an experience, and a quality just is an attribute in respect of which one item resembles another. Merely being conscious, i.e. responsive to sensory stimuli, doesn't imply, as Godfrey Smith suggests, the existence of a point of view from which one thing might seem to be like another. It's only my functioning as a speaker, my asking and answering questions, that identifies my body as the location of one who can both be held responsible and take responsibility for his point of view, an impossibility for any non-linguistic animal. And what that point of view is can't be recognized as such even by me until I've made it explicit, as I'm doing here. I know that letter was hard to follow. It's barely English. It's the Jordan Petersonification of the language. But what this writer is saying in English is that there can't be any such thing. You can't have selfhood if you don't have an idea of the subjunctive, if you don't have an idea of comparisons, similes and metaphors. I can't know what it's like to be something unless I know what it means to be like anything. And unless you are a linguistic animal, in other words, a human, you won't do that. The author says, merely being conscious, i.e. responsive to sensory stimuli, doesn't imply, as Godfrey Smith suggests, the experience of a point of view from which one might seem to be like another. By extrapolation of this author's point, what he is saying is that unless you can speak, unless you can describe what that one thing is like another thing, you have no idea whether or not a sensory input is bad or good. And it doesn't take much teasing of that kind of attitude to get you right back to Descartes, to get you right back to the barbaric experiments that are done on non-human animals to this day by the millions. If you're saying that an animal, a non-human animal, what the author is here is saying non-linguistic animal, if you're saying that a non-human animal has no sense of what it's like to be anything because it has no ability to liken anything to anything else, then if you tease that out and follow it to its logical conclusion, you will say that those animals don't know whether or not it's a bad thing to be in pain, whether or not it's a bad thing to be hungry, whether or not it's a bad thing to have your newly born children taken away from you while you watch and cannot follow. They don't. Beasts abstract not. There's no way that they can feel any of those things and make those discriminations because you don't have that ability. I'm sorry, you're just born without it. This letter writer is quite literally in his last line saying that you aren't a thinking animal and you can't be unless you write a pompous letter to the New York Review of Books. If you can do that, then sure. Otherwise, no. No. And that's infuriating. That is every bit as infuriating. It is sentiments like that I expected from that book review, and it's sentiments like that are the basis for, aside from power, for humanity's systematic and unending, ceaseless, limitless torture of the non-human world. Because if they didn't like it, they'd say so. And it's not just that they can't say so, it's that they can't even dislike it. They don't have the simile and metaphor ability to even know that what we're doing to them is horrifying, because they don't have any way to say what it's like or not like. This is exactly the same thing, and exactly as unfair as if this were the New York Review of Books written by peregrine falcons in a world dominated by peregrine falcons, who said, as a particularly pompous peregrine falcon pecks a letter to the New York Review and says, well, you've got the question all wrong, I'm afraid, e.g., because unless you can stoop out of the sky, unless you can dive out of the sky at 75 miles an hour, well, then you don't have the ability to say what you like and don't like. Once you have that ability, come back and see me. Until then, we're going to have factories where our workers, our peregrine falcons in lab coats, walk down a line of humans who have their heads clamped in visors and systematically peck out their eyes without anesthesia. And sure, they wriggle a little, but that's an autonomous reflex. They wriggle a little, but they don't have the ability to say whether or not they like it or what it's like for this to be bad, because they just aren't able to do it. They just can't fly that fast. Anyway, maybe that letter will get angry responses, but I don't think the New York Review of Books tends to do that. They don't tend to publish that sort of thing. I think there would have to be a massive controversy for them to keep publishing letters. They did that famously with Stephen Jay Gould, but I don't know that they will for this. I just thought I would speak up for non-human animals everywhere. But anyway, let's look at the books. And the first two we can look at are things that I actually saw yesterday. I like the surprise of opening books with you, same as you do, but I want to show you these anyway, at least these two. The others were mostly junk. But this one is the finished copy of Is Anyone Listening? What Animals Are Saying to Each Other and to Us by Denise Herzing. So pretty apropos in the shadow of that letter. And this is the finished copy of a book about animal communication. About how it turns out that if you know what the hell you're talking about, they don't need to be awash in similes and metaphors. Let's see here. This comes out in mid-November. If you could pose one question to a dolphin, what would it be? And what might a dolphin ask you? For 40 years, researcher and author Denise Herzing has investigated these and related questions of marine mammal communication. With the assistance of a friendly community of Atlantic spotted dolphins in the Bahamas, she studies two-way communication between different dolphin species and between humans and dolphins using a variety of cutting-edge experiments. But the dolphins are not the only ones talking, and in this wide-ranging and accessible book, she explores the astonishing realities of interspecies communication, a skill that humans currently lack. Not all humans, not all species, but I get what you mean. This book connects research on dolphin communication to findings from Jane Goodall on chimpanzees, Diane Fossey on mountain gorillas, Cynthia Moss on African elephants. All three of those wrote books that are great. And others driving today's exploration of possible animal languages. And I have read this book. We got the advanced copy of it, and I have read it, and I loved it. It's not long. Perfect foray, actually, for Nonfiction November, which starts today. This is not long, and it's a subject that's inherently interesting. I guarantee you that most of the people listening to me live with a non-human animal. And I guarantee that that relationship, as loving and supportive as it is full of miscommunication. So this is an inherently interesting book. I wanted to show you. The finished copy is here. It'll be available for sale in mid-November. And then the other thing that we saw, I did have a sheet for it. This comes out in late February, so it's not immediately occupying to me, but I wanted to sing its praises. I haven't read it. I can still sing its praises. Unless the author's taken a 2x4 to the head, I can sing its praises. This is the new Gray Man novel by Mark Greaney. This is Midnight Black. And this comes out in mid-February. These are the adventures of Court Gentry, who is a ex-CIA, ex-garroter, ex-black bag guy. He's an extremely dangerous individual operator called the Gray Man, known as the Gray Man. And the series started off years ago with a book called The Gray Man, and it's terrific. If you're in the mood for a really good action thriller series, and maybe some of the ones you're reading are disappointing you, try this one if you haven't already, because it's fantastic. I first became aware of this author through necrofiction. He was one of the authors who was given the birth of writing Tom Clancy novels set in Tom Clancy's fictional universe after Tom Clancy died and went to hell. And I read some of those books are doorstops. They're as big as anything that Clancy wrote. And the Mark Greaney ones, when I read them, they were consistently really good. Not just better than Clancy. That's not a high bar to clear. But better than a lot of stuff that was out there. Really smart and intelligent. So I was happy to move to the Gray Man series. This is the latest one. The setup is just perfect here. In this book, a winter sunrise over the Great Plains of Russia is no cause for celebration. The temperature barely rises above zero, and the guards at penal colony IK-22 are determined to take their misery out on the prisoners. Chief among them, one Zoya Zakharov. And Zoya Zakharova is the lover of the Gray Man, and a fan-favorite character in this series. Once a master spy for Russian foreign intelligence, then a partner and lover of the Gray Man, she has information the Kremlin wants. and they don't care what they have to do to get it. But if they think 1,000 miles of frozen wasteland and a combined power of the Russian police state is enough to protect them, they don't know the Gray Man. He is coming, and no one is safe. That premise sounds very hackneyed, I know, but Gray Man fans are going to love hearing it, because that is just perfect for this author and another adventure from this character. Fantastic. This is just Unbound Pages. This is just Unbound Pages. I imagine that I will get This is just Unbound Pages. I imagine I will get a galley copy and then a finished copy of this. But if you are a Gray Man fan already, well, then you're going to want to know that this is coming out and maybe be on the first on your list to hold it at the library or whatnot. And if you aren't, but you want to read a really good action-adventure series, an action-adventure series that doesn't insult your intelligence, then you might want to, go online, maybe go to the Amazon Marketplace or eBay, and see if somebody is selling like the first 3 paperbacks. Battered, crease-spined, mass-market paperbacks of the Gray Man series. I'm sure that somebody is, and I'm sure that wouldn't set you back much money. And they're really good. It's a series worth your time. So those are the 2 that we opened, plus an almost physically unbelievable amount of background noise. And now we'll move on to the 2 that we haven't opened, and we'll see if you can hear me over that. All the it's an occupational hazard because all the windows are open. It's just too hot to close any windows, night or day. It's just too hot to close any windows. Okay, well, the sheet here is not doing me any good. It's all just blurbs. So let's see here. Okay, do you have an actual sheet? No, you don't. All right. All right, this comes out in March. This is a work of history. The author is Russell Shorto, and he did a book called The Island at the Center of the World, which I just recently reread, comparatively recently. It was just a couple of months ago. I think it was this summer, the beginning of this summer, which we must now start to call first summer. The beginning of first summer is around May, early June. That's when the weather starts to heat up. And then you go through the dog days of summer, and you go through June and July and August. And then there's, because the Earth itself physically has tilted just a bit, you go through a dip of colder weather. The temperatures will plunge down into the mid-60s Fahrenheit. But then you have second summer, where the temperatures go right back up into the early 80s and stay there. But during the beginning, I think it was during first summer, at the beginning of first summer, that I found a copy of The Island at the Center of the World in a little free library in hardcover, and I view those as just a nudge from fate. I usually read them right away, and I did, and I really liked it. I liked it a lot more than I did the first time I read it, when it took the reviewing world by storm. And this is that author's next book. This is Taking Manhattan, the extraordinary events that created New York and shaped America. So this comes out in March. It's already loaded with blurbs, but I don't have an actual descriptive sheet for it. We'll just read from the inside here. In 1664, England decided to invade the Dutch-controlled city of New Amsterdam on Manhattan Island. Charles II and his brother, the Duke of York, had dreams of empire, and their arch-rivals, the Dutch, were in the way. But Richard Nicolls, who led the English flotilla bent on destruction, changed his strategy once he began parleying with Peter Stuyvesant, the Dutch leader on Manhattan. Bristling with vibrant characters, this book reveals the founding of New York to be an invention, the result not of an English military takeover, but of a clever negotiation that led to a fusion of the multi-ethnic capitalistic society the Dutch had pioneered to the power of the rising English empire. But the birth of what might be termed the first modern city is also a story of the brutal dispossession of Native Americans and of the roots of American slavery. This book shows how the paradox of New York's origins, boundless opportunity coupled with subjugation and displacement, reflect America's promise and failure to this day. That's a nice parallel. That's good. The author, whose work has been described as astonishing by somebody who'd had too many martinis at lunch at the New York Times, and revelatory, that's New York Magazine, again laying it on with a trowel, has once again mined newly translated sources to offer a vibrant tale and a fresh and trenchant argument about America's beginnings. Fantastic. Fantastic. So I've got this. Later on I will get the finished copy. But that's popular American history. By popular I don't mean dumb. I mean for a popular audience. coming out in the beginning of the new year. I am not going to diverge from that mention of the beginning of a new year to a political rant. I am not going to do that. It's as easy as that. I am the captain of my vessel. I don't need to do that. So we'll move on here. We'll finish up with. Okay. You're not making it easy, are you? This comes out in mid-February. Do we have a sheet? No paperwork at all. All right, this is by Stephen Gillen, and it is Presidents at War: How World War II Shaped a Generation of Presidents from Eisenhower to JFK through Reagan and Bush. And we can just read the back. This comes out on February 11th. World War II loomed over the 20th century, transforming every level of American society and international relationships and searing itself into the psyche of an entire generation, including that of 7 American presidents: John F. Kennedy, Dwight Eisenhower, Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, and George H.W. Bush. This is another reason why I love the subject of the Second World War so much, because that statement is not hyperbole. It's impossible to overstate the effect of this enormous war. Its shadow is with us today. The lessons of World War II, more than party affiliation or ideology, defined the presidencies of these 7 men. Oh, come now. Oh, come now. They returned home determined to confront any force that threatened to undermine the war's hard-won ideals, each with their own unique understanding of patriotism, sacrifice, and America's role in global politics. In this book, the author examines what these men took away from the war and how they then applied it to Cold War policies that proceeded to change America and the world forever. Okay. So you're going to be talking a lot about the World War II experiences of these people. Yes? So how are you going to do that? Are you going to do that chapter by chapter, president by president, or are you going to weave a narrative that touches on all of them all the time? The table of contents doesn't actually tell me. I don't know. Yes, the table. There's no. This is a review copy, so there's no. There are a lot of finished details here, but I do have the table of contents, and the table of contents ends with epilogue, acknowledgments, notes, index. What's missing from that? Bibliography is missing from that. So if you want to build a bibliography for this author, feel free to email him and say you'll do it for $25 so that maybe the book can come out with a bibliography instead of you building it yourself by trolling through the notes when you want to know what he read and didn't read. But this, I know a lot of these World War II, the World War II histories of some of these men, of course. The one that I'm the haziest on is Gerald Ford. So we'll see what that's all about. But Reagan, stateside, well, Kennedy, PT 109, also Nixon, who's a rather fascinating figure in World War II. That's going to be a lot of fun. I don't know about that thesis of it being the overriding concern of of these men when they got into office, overriding party politics. Ronald Reagan. But either way, it's going to be a lot of fun to do. So there you go. That is the mail, plus absolutely apocalyptic background noise. So we have Is Anyone Listening?, the finished copy. We have Midnight Black, the new Gray Man novel coming out next year. We have Taking Manhattan, about the business deals that started off Mega City. And finally, Presidents at War, by Steve Gillen. That name sounds awful familiar. I feel certain that I've read this author before. Is there a bio note attached to this thing? Professor Emeritus at the University of Oklahoma. Spent more than 2 decades as a scholar in residence at the History Channel. Okay, what about your books, though? Oh, America's Reluctant Prince, The Life of John F. Kennedy Jr. Okay, that's where I know you from. I guess that wasn't too unpredictable, right? Dead Kennedys, dead Romans, and dogs. Okay, well, so that's the mail. That, and also a letter to the New York Review of Books underscoring the fact that until you can write a pompous letter to the New York Review of Books, you're not really real. If I can write a pompous letter to the New York Review of Books and you can't, I can probably stick needles in your eyes. Fortunately, those voices are more and more in the minority, so I don't have to gripe about it too much. It would be great if the voices that are saying no, there are many ways to communicate, there are many ways to liken things to another. Obviously, all non-linguistic animals, all non-human animals can liken things to other things and know what it is to seem to be something and seem not to be something. Obviously, that's true. Obviously, it is. so, I mean, there are a million examples that come to mind. There are a million examples that come to mind that come to mind for you. Does your pet animal have preferences? Where do preferences come from other than that? Sorry, I've already ranted about it. So that's the mail. We'll wrap this up for now, and I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.